Hello there, you're watching Breaking Views on NDTV. I'm Maha Siddiqui. India hosted the SCO, that is the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, for the first time 6 years after it became a full member. The meeting, that is the summit, was held in a virtual format. India said that there were several reasons for holding it in a virtual format and not in person, even though the Samarkand SCO Summit just last year was held in person. Though the specifics of the reasons were not spelled out, but many people allude to the fact that this is because of the tricky situation India has at the moment with other member nations, like with China. The ongoing border friction in eastern Ladakh with Pakistan. India has not had a bilateral conversation with Pakistan since the Uri terror attack, and India has clearly said terror and talks will not go together. At the platform today, Prime Minister Modi raised the issue of terrorism, and he said that cross-border terrorism must stop. He also highlighted that the fact that there were double standards on terror by various countries need to be stopped as well if the fight against terrorism has to be a united one. On the other hand, the issue of connectivity and the respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty, despite connectivity being a major issue, also needs to be adhered to, is what the Prime Minister said. This on a forum when China continued to go ahead and propagate the idea of the Belt and Road Initiative, an initiative under which its flagship program CPEC, CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, flouts the territorial integrity and sovereignty of India, passing through Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Let's first listen in to what the Prime Minister said in the inaugural statement.
क्षेत्र की प्रगति के लिए मजबूत कनेक्टिविटी का होना बहुत ही आवश्यक है, किंतु इन प्रयासों में एससीओ चार्टर के मूल सिद्धांतों, विशेष रूप से सदस्य देशों की संप्रभुता और क्षेत्रीय अखंडता का सम्मान करना बहुत ही आवश्यक है। कुछ देश क्रॉस बॉर्डर टेररिज्म को अपनी नीतियों के इंस्ट्रूमेंट के रूप में इस्तेमाल करते हैं, आतंकवादियों को पनाह देते हैं। एससीओ को ऐसे देशों की आलोचना में कोई संकोच नहीं करना चाहिए। ऐसे गंभीर विषय पर दोहरे मापदंड के लिए कोई स्थान नहीं होना चाहिए।
So what is the way forward for a forum seemingly fraught with contradictions, with member nations flouting the mandate and disregarding concerns of other nations? This is with regards to terrorism, and terrorism is a very important mandate under the SCO. There is a separate forum that is RATS under SCO. Also, the issue of connectivity, something that is constantly taken up in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, connectivity with a lot of Central Asian countries. But do member nations adhere to territorial integrity and sovereignty of the other nations? Respect that? That again is a big question mark. Let me introduce our guest now. Dr. Tara Karta, former Director, National Security Council Secretariat; Brahmachalani, Strategic Affairs Expert; Tatiana Kukareva, Senior Journalist, Moscow; and Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, I first want to come to you over the issue of, first of all, the meeting, the summit being held in a virtual format. India has not specified the exact reasons, but analysts do believe that there is such an uncomfortable relationship at this point with both China and Pakistan, and under such circumstances, would it have been even possible to hold an in-person summit?
Well, Maha, you're right. This was certainly a factor which must have gone into our deciding to have a virtual summit. But let us also not forget that it would have been impossible for President Putin to come to New Delhi for attending the summit. He is so caught up in his domestic situation that it would have not been practical to expect him to take the time out. Therefore, having the virtual summit was an excellent idea. And I think that the day and age has come when we should have more and more such international meetings on a virtual forum, you know, because leaders don't have the time to travel, and they can discuss, they can air their views, they can come to some agreements even in a virtual manner.
Tatiana, President Putin had travelled for the Samarkand summit only last year when Prime Minister Modi had met him separately, bilaterally, and had said this is not the era of war. What has changed in the last 8 months? Why did we, as per Moscow, have a virtual summit? Would it not have been possible for President Putin to attend the summit, considering the setbacks that Russia has suffered, and also President Putin himself personally considering the rebellion?
Well, first and foremost, you're basically taking words out of my mouth. I was just going to disagree with the ambassador. You know, the President Putin did attend the last year's summit in person, and he's not the only one attending this one virtually. And to the extent of, speaking of the fact that you're still fighting a rebellion, good that thing to call it a rebellion, not a coup, because we've discussed this on NDTV, that, the forces of Wagner Group never said anything about a threat to the president himself. First and foremost, they indeed reaffirmed their commitment to the president's power while making those statements, and made it abundantly clear that it had nothing to do with him personally and with any, debate. There was no debate towards his power in office. So I believe that we have to remember that there was an actual line, official line, as to why the summit is being held virtually this time. But I do believe that it does allow for, it does save the leaders a lot of time while traveling, because while it is easy and it's possible to attend it in person, it also, unfortunately, the conflicts underway right now make for a much larger traveling time in transit, unfortunately.
All right. Brahmachalani, now, why I said that the forum seems to be fraught with contradictions is because of the two specific issues I mentioned with regards to connectivity and China's Belt and Road Initiative, and the issue of terrorism as well. What do you see as the future of the SCO? We have new members in the SCO as well. Iran has today become a full member of the SCO, and Belarus will become a full member next year. What is the future of SCO?
That's a good question. But, on the issue of holding the summit in virtual form, this was not India's decision. It was a collective decision made long ago. It was made because in September, India is supposed to host President Putin and President Xi Jinping. And it didn't make sense for these two leaders to travel to New Delhi in July, just 2 months before the G20 summit. But the fact is that this decision was taken long before developments happened in Russia. But to your question, India is the only established democracy in the SCO. And as the name of the organization suggests, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, this initiative was China's initiative. It was China that conceived of the SCO. In 2001, this initiative was unveiled, and China's sway over the SCO is quite visible today. But what's very interesting about the SCO is that it includes America's main enemies, China, Russia, and Iran. These are all three members of the SCO. Now, India, as I said, is the only established democracy in the SCO, and its membership gives respectability to the SCO. Without India, the SCO will be seen as an anti-Western club of autocracies. And this has been reinforced by the entry of Iran as the new SCO member. But the question that we need to ask ourselves is that, what does the SCO hold for India? Is there any strategic value for India from the SCO, or is it largely a symbolic value for India? And I think this question is not often asked, not even debated, actually, in my view. The fact is that, in my view, the SCO hardly meshes with India's interest. It's increasingly dominated by China and includes India's other regional adversary, Pakistan. Okay. So the reference was made at the beginning about Modi mentioning the importance of territorial integrity. it's just not Pakistan that is threatening India's territorial integrity. Right now, China is involved in a military standoff with India.
That's right.
And that standoff has been triggered by what? By China's territorial intrusions on Indian territory. So you have two of India's, the two main adversaries of India, both flouting international law and international norms. In the case of China, it has openly flouted binding bilateral agreements by making these territorial encroachments on Indian territory. So obviously, the SCO has limitations. It may have some symbolic value for India in terms of hedging, trying to balance India's supposed tilt towards the West, trying to show that India remains neutral, remains multi-aligned. In that sense, the SCO might have some symbolic value. But what is the substantive value for India from the SCO is a question that we don't ask ourselves.
All right. But I want to bring in Dr. Tara Karta, because time and again, Russia has said that they would want the SCO as a format where member nations can have better relations. And we have seen that despite the standoff in eastern Ladakh, the two occasions when right after the friction started, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar met and spoke to his counterpart Wang Yi was on the sidelines of the SCO meeting. So in that context, does the forum help?
I think you're right in that respect. It is, after all, we've said that no normal relations until the border is settled, status quo ante. So the SCO does give a platform to discuss not only with China, but with Russia, as well as various countries, not just on the border, on Ukraine as well. So yeah, to that extent, I would say it is useful. But the thing is, I mean, if you look at that whole grouping, I think 19 out of 21 states are Belt and Road Initiative members. So, and the one which is not is Russia, who is not formally a member, but has got huge investments from China in its own country, including connectivity. So, it's a little, we are the only non-BRI member in that huge grouping, right? So, that feels a little strange. I would agree with Brahma on that. Second thing is, these are, how can you have a grouping which is, what is the threat you're sort of fighting against? What is your common interest? I don't know. So there is, in fact, there was a very interesting comment by President Xi in his speech, where I think he called for, that we should have a security shield, a solid security shield in our region. I mean, to my mind, that is actually ironic. My security shield would be against China, right? So unless you can, President Xi particularly, China is like, he says, is the main person here. Unless they can bring an end to this border issue, SCO makes no sense to me.
Okay, Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, then are we only looking at this grouping, of course, being in India, from India's perspective, and therefore we are seeing this grouping being fraught with so many contradictions?
Well, indeed, there is a huge gap between the proclamations of countries at the SCO and what actually happens in practice. For instance, the SCO advocates peaceful resolution of conflicts, respect for territorial integrity, non-aggression, non-use of force. But look at China. In its relationship with India, it flouts all these proclamations of the SCO. So there is an inherent contradiction between what the SCO sets out to do and what some of its leading members are doing on the ground. But that is a reality which we have to live with, because we do have certain objectives which go beyond China and Pakistan, and that is opening up a relationship with the Central Asian countries. We have a lot of common historical background with these countries. We want to have closer interaction, and we do not want that the Chinese influence in this region should expand more than what already it is. Mrs. Tara Karta correctly pointed out that almost all the members of the SCO are members of the BRI. And that shows the sort of interaction which China has with these countries. So by being a member of this organization and trying to play an active role, we are counterbalancing our the objectives which China has and which Pakistan has. And I think despite the contradictions which exist between the proclamations, as I said, and what happens in practice, we are better off being in this organization than being outside.
All right. Tatiana, now as far as territorial integrity and sovereignty is concerned, while most panelists refer to China, because this is in the context of India, with the friction in eastern Ladakh on the border continuing for over 3 years now, that same accusation has been made against Russia as well in context of Ukraine. Ukraine may not be a member nation, but the fact that the SCO mandate is that member nations must adhere to some practices, international practices. How does Russia view the SCO mandate and format then?
Well, I do believe that the view from the Russian side is a very, it's a very specific story, because first and foremost, if you remember that the regions that we're talking about and the territorial integrity, right now, from the Russian standpoint, the regions of Ukraine in which the action is taking place have been accepted into Russia. So if we're talking about territorial integrity from Russia's point of view, it means that they are in fact part of Russia. So we're not violating any territorial integrity whatsoever. We still have to liberate parts of those regions if we're talking about the position the government is taking, and it makes every sense in the world, because the regions pled to be accepted, we satisfied their wishes. And in the meantime, rightfully so, when we speak about SCO as a format, you're forgetting one vital thing, just how important such formats are for investment, for all member states, for, the stand that India and China alike have been taking about against the unipolar world, just as much as in the format of BRICS, for example, which, as far as I remember, India is also a member of. And these formats are vital. The issue of territorial integrity, if you look at it from China's point of view or from India's point of view, it's always a matter of point of view, however cynical that might sound. So the issue of territorial integrity in regards to Ukraine is very different from if you're looking from Kiev or you're looking from Moscow. And again, we're forgetting that this conflict has been ongoing since 2014, not 2022. And this issue has been very different for us in Moscow from, starting from 2014. However, the most vital part of this format, we're completely disregarding for now, and it is about economics. It is about integration.
Okay, so let me bring in Dr. Tara Kartha there. Dr. Tara Kartha, if apart from security, the issue of trade, economics is important, how do you reconcile the two? Because you really cannot go ahead with economic ties, even in a globalized world, with member nations which are flouting territorial integrity and sovereignty of another nation. Can you?
I thought it was interesting that Prime Minister Modi flagged Chabahar port, for example, as an issue. Second, he linked that also to the international North-South corridor, which is something we have with Russia. So that means Chabahar works as a hub, not only for Central Asia, but for SCO countries as a whole. Uzbekistan, for instance, we had a recent meeting with Uzbekistan about a couple of months back, where we're talking about using Chabahar. Now, where will that trade come from? That trade will also come from China. So connectivity, I think, is India is taking that very seriously. You have a China-India cooperation on the Mangla port in Bangladesh, for example. So that is an area, I think, which India is interested in. And we are looking, and basically for what? For getting our trade out.
Okay.
So there are climate change. These are the countries who should be cooperating on climate change.
Okay.
We are the countries most affected. So there are these areas
All right.
where you can make a difference.
Okay, we're really running out of time. So, Brahmachalani, I'll request you to keep your answer short. As far as economics is concerned, there are some member nations today, especially from the Central Asian countries, that in fact express their dissatisfaction in the manner in which the SCO was proceeding on those counts. Would you say that they are right in expressing their dissatisfaction and that SCO really hasn't done much on that count?
Well, the question to ask is, what exactly is the SCO achieving as a collective grouping? It's, for China, the SCO is an important vehicle to advance its commercial and strategic interests. For Russia, the SCO is important to cement its partnership with China, especially in the current context, given the fact that the Western Bloc are waging an increasingly escalating proxy war against Russia. So that's forcing Moscow to pivot to Beijing. And the SCO provides one of the forums to help cement this new axis between Beijing and Moscow. But on the multilateral front, because the SCO is not designed to discuss bilateral issues. For example, you can't discuss India-China border issues in the SCO format. This is a multilateral forum for multilateral collaboration. And the question that needs to be asked is that what sort of multilateral collaboration has the SCO managed to accomplish? The fact is very little. The fact is that it meets every year. It issues nice sounding declarations. The New Delhi Declaration is also very nice sounding, pious words in it. But the fact is that the SCO as a collective body doesn't have much to show in terms of collective action.
All right. Final 2 minutes. I've got a little more time left now. Ambassador Prabhu-Dayal, then I want to finally ask you, with the question with which we started, what is the road ahead then for the SCO? And now we will have new member states, Iran, and next year Belarus as well.
Well, India will certainly try to make sure that the SCO doesn't become an organization which is out and out an anti-Western one. There are countries like Russia, China, and Iran, which are very, very anti-United States. We will certainly try and make sure that this organization remains a balanced one. Again, to come back to a question which you started off with, why is it being held in a virtual format? I never said that it was on account of the so-called Wagner mutiny situation, but Putin's preoccupations with the situation back home, with the war against Ukraine. I have reason to believe that there were indications that he would prefer a virtual summit. We were also unsure of the position which the Pakistanis would take. And given the overall scenario, it was felt advisable. And on the 30th of May, our ministry announced that the SCO Summit will be in a virtual format. I think all said and done, this was the correct decision.
We'll have to leave it at that. Many thanks to all our panelists for joining us here on this discussion on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, hosted by India for the first time, 6 years after it became a full member.